I knew something was wrong the night she stopped saying goodnight. It wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors, no shouting, but the silence carried more weight than any argument could. She lay on her side of the bed, her phone glowing faintly against her face, and when I turned to look at her, she angled the screen away. That was when the first real chill settled into my chest. For weeks, I had been noticing the small shifts. The way she started answering questions with one-word replies. The way her smile reached only halfway to her eyes. The way our conversations had become less about us and more about logistics, bills, schedules, errands. I didn't want to believe it at first, but that night, staring at the back of her head while she scrolled in the dark, I knew something was brewing. And the worst thought crept into me like poison. What if she's planning to leave me? The possibility gnawed at me, keeping me awake long after she had drifted off. My mind spun in relentless loops, flashing images of divorce papers, empty bank accounts, and me standing alone in the house we had built together. I couldn't afford to be blindsided. If she truly was planning to divorce me, I had to be prepared. So I did the one thing I thought might protect me. I quietly moved my assets. I'm Mark, 43 years old, a financial consultant in Denver, and this all happened 2 years ago. Looking back, I realized that decision was the first domino in a chain I never saw coming. If you want more stories like this, subscribe, give this a like, and share where you're tuning in from the comments. The idea of moving my assets didn't come to me instantly. It was born out of nights of unease, of lying awake with my thoughts knotted in paranoia and dread. I had spent years working in finance, advising other people on how to safeguard their futures. Yet here I was, terrified that the person I trusted most was quietly positioning herself to dismantle mine. At first, I told myself I was overthinking. Married couples go through dry spells. People get distracted. Life gets heavy. But denial couldn't silence the way my stomach twisted whenever she locked her phone as I walked into the room, or the way she had started working late without explanation. I had seen too many clients blindsided by divorce. Men and women who thought they were safe until they weren't. So one afternoon, after she texted that she'd be home late again, I sat in my office staring at my laptop. My finger hovered over the mouse, my heart pounding in my ears. Every financial instinct told me that if I was right, if she was truly preparing for a split, then hesitation would cost me everything I had built. I opened the accounts. I began quietly shifting funds, dividing them between private savings and investment accounts in my name only. I started moving titles of smaller assets, vehicles, and even a little cabin up in the mountains that she never liked visiting. Each transaction was deliberate, each keystroke heavy with guilt, because while I was protecting myself, I was also betraying something sacred, trust. I didn't tell her what I was doing. How could I? To ask her outright, to say, "Are you planning to divorce me?" felt like admitting that the cracks were too deep to fix. Instead, I played along in the daylight hours, smiling, cooking dinner, asking about her day. But at night, when she slept, I sat in my study, reshaping my future in secret. The strangest part was how calm I felt once I began. The anxiety that had eaten at me turned into a strange kind of focus. If she wanted to leave, fine, but I wouldn't let myself be blindsided. I wouldn't wake up one morning with a stranger serving me papers and half my life gone. Still, I couldn't shake the question, was I protecting myself from her, or from the truth about us? And just when I thought I'd secured everything, 2 weeks later, she dropped something on me that I never could have anticipated. It was a Saturday morning when she finally said something that made my stomach turn cold. The air in our kitchen still smelled of coffee, though mine had gone lukewarm in the mug I hadn't touched. She was standing by the counter, scrolling on her phone like she always did, her hair tied up in that casual bun she wore when she didn't care to impress anyone. And then, without looking at me, she said it. Just 5 words. "We need to talk soon." That was it. Nothing more. She placed her phone down, picked up her keys, and left to run errands. No explanation, no context, just a landmine left at my feet. The words rang in my ears all day, louder than the hum of the fridge, louder than the TV I turned on just to drown out my thoughts. "We need to talk soon." It was the classic prelude to disaster, a phrase I had heard countless times from clients who were blindsided in their marriages. And each time, it was followed by divorce papers. I tried to convince myself maybe it wasn't that. Maybe she wanted to talk about bills or about her job or about something completely ordinary. But deep down, I knew better. That night, while she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, replaying her tone, her expression, or rather, her lack of one. There had been no softness, no affection in her delivery. Just flat, detached words. My heart clenched with the certainty that she had already made her decision. That was when tension settled into me like a permanent weight. Every sound in the house became amplified. The creak of the floorboards, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I felt like I was waiting for an execution I couldn't escape. The next morning, I decided I couldn't just sit in that silence anymore. I had to prepare for whatever was coming, not just financially, but mentally. I told myself, if she's going to walk away, I'll be ready. I won't be destroyed. But even as I tried to convince myself of that, part of me wanted desperately to be wrong. And then, as if to make things worse, I stumbled on something that deepened my suspicion beyond repair. The discovery was accidental. One of those moments that feels like fate is pushing you toward the truth, whether you're ready for it or not. She had left her laptop open on the dining table one evening. That, in itself, was unusual. My wife, Claire, was meticulous about her privacy. Her phone was always face down, her devices locked tight with passwords. But that night, she must have been distracted because there it was, her laptop, screen still glowing faintly, cursor blinking inside an email draft. I froze in the doorway, my pulse quickening. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew that crossing that line meant I was no longer just suspicious. I was prying. But the paranoia had been eating at me for weeks, and temptation outweighed restraint. I stepped closer, heart pounding, eyes skimming the subject line. It read, "Meeting with attorney." My chest tightened. My mouth went dry. The draft was short, polite, and professional. She was requesting to confirm an appointment date. No details, no explanations, just enough to shatter me. An attorney. My mind leapt to the worst conclusion. Divorce lawyer. I stood there, staring at the words, feeling the floor tilt beneath me. It didn't matter that she hadn't sent it yet. The intent was clear. She was planning something behind my back. When I finally backed away, I felt sick, like I had just swallowed poison. I closed the laptop carefully, quietly, as though leaving no trace could erase what I had seen. But the truth was already lodged in me, like a splinter. That night, sitting alone in my study, I tried to make sense of it. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe she needed an attorney for something unrelated, work, property, paperwork. But the more I replayed her coldness, her secrecy, her distance, the less convincing those excuses became. And so I doubled down. I funneled more money into accounts she didn't know existed. I moved some investments offshore, where even the sharpest divorce lawyer would struggle to untangle them. I made sure the deed to the mountain cabin was sealed tight in my name alone. Every move was fueled by the image of her blindsiding me with papers while I stood defenseless. But as I worked, a darker thought crept into me. What if, by protecting myself, I was also sealing the fate of our marriage? What if she wasn't fully committed to leaving yet, but my actions, the secrecy, the cold calculation, were turning suspicion into inevitability? The tension between us grew thicker in those weeks. Her glances were fleeting, her words sparse. And then, one night, while I was reviewing a balance transfer, I caught her watching me from the doorway of my study. Her eyes lingered on me, unblinking, as though she knew that I was hiding something, just as I suspected she was. Neither of us said a word. And in that silence, I realized this wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was war. The days after that silent standoff in my study were unbearable. Every time Claire walked past me, I felt her eyes flicker with questions she didn't ask. Every time I heard her phone buzz, I was certain it was her attorney. The house, once filled with comfortable silences, now buzzed with unspoken hostility. Even the walls seemed to echo differently, like they knew something between us had cracked. I tried to act normal. I really did. I cooked dinner. I asked about her work. I even suggested a movie night. But my voice sounded foreign to me, strained, hollow. She saw right through it. The frustration was like a fire under my skin. If she wanted to leave, why not just say it? Why keep me in this purgatory of half smiles and locked screens? I replayed our years together, birthdays, vacations, the early years of our marriage when we couldn't keep our hands off each other. And the more I thought about it, the more bitter I became. I had given her everything. I had built a life for us from the ground up. And now, without explanation, she was tearing it down piece by piece. One evening, while she was showering, I found myself pacing our bedroom like a caged animal. My mind screamed, ask her, force her to admit it, get it out in the open. But every time I pictured confronting her, I saw two outcomes. Either she'd lie, or she'd confirm my worst fear. Instead, I swallowed the words and let the frustration fester. That frustration began spilling into the smallest interactions. When she asked me to pick up groceries, I snapped at her for not planning ahead. When she mentioned being tired from work, I muttered something about her always being gone lately. I saw the hurt flicker across her face, but I couldn't stop myself. It was like I wanted her to slip, to reveal her secret, even if it meant fighting. The truth was, I wasn't just frustrated with her. I was frustrated with myself for being so afraid, for playing defense instead of offense, for tiptoeing around a truth that was chewing me alive. And then, one night, the frustration finally boiled over. We were sitting at the dinner table. She had made pasta, though neither of us touched it much. She scrolled her phone as she ate, her fork clinking against the plate in a rhythm that grated on me. "Who are you texting?" I asked suddenly, my voice sharper than I intended. She looked up, startled. "Just Emily, her best friend." But I didn't believe her. The words tasted sour in my mouth. "Right?" I muttered, pushing my plate away. Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" I opened my mouth to fire back, to let everything spill out about the email, the secrecy, the late nights. But the words stuck in my throat. If I told her what I had seen, she'd know I had been snooping. And then what? So instead, I said nothing. I stood up, carried my plate to the sink, and left the table without another word. Behind me, I heard her sigh, long, heavy, tired. That sound haunted me, because in it, I heard not just her weariness with dinner, but her weariness with us. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe the distance between us wasn't entirely her doing. Maybe my suspicion and frustration were feeding the very storm I feared. But if I was partly to blame, I couldn't see it clearly then. All I saw was the wall growing higher between us. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I found something else, something that left me both furious and terrified. It happened on a Thursday night, and I still remember the exact way the air felt. Thick, heavy, like a storm was pressing against the windows. Claire had gone to bed early, claiming she was exhausted from meetings. I stayed up, pacing between the living room and my study. Restless, my thoughts like a swarm of hornets I couldn't quiet. I wanted answers, but I was too much of a coward to demand them outright. That was when I noticed her purse, carelessly draped over the arm of the couch. Normally, she kept it zipped, neat, tucked away in the closet. But tonight, it hung open, the faint glow of her phone screen peeking out. My frustration burned hotter. Why should I keep living in uncertainty when the truth might be right there, inches from me? I told myself I wasn't snooping, that I was simply protecting myself, that I had a right to know what my own wife was plotting. That lie was just enough to make me reach into the purse, slide the phone out, and carry it into the study. Her passcode was no mystery. I had seen it countless times. With a trembling hand, I unlocked it. The first thing I checked was her texts. My heart raced as I scrolled through her conversations. Most were mundane. Her mother, a couple of co-workers, Emily like she'd said. But then one thread caught my eye. The name wasn't saved in her contacts, just a number. My stomach dropped. The texts weren't romantic, at least not overtly. But they were intimate in another way. Cryptic exchanges about timelines, about finalizing things soon, about keeping it quiet until the right moment. Every line read like confirmation that she was planning something life-changing behind my back. And then came the one that froze my blood. I'll have the paperwork ready by the end of the month. I nearly dropped the phone. Paperwork. End of the month. Divorce. It had to be. My pulse thundered in my ears. My mind jumped to every scenario, every horror story I had ever heard from clients who lost everything in a divorce because they trusted too much, waited too long. I slammed the phone face down on my desk, chest heaving, anger and fear colliding inside me. I wanted to wake her right then, shove the phone in her face, demand she tell me the truth. But another voice in my head stopped me, a colder, sharper voice. Don't let her know what you found. Don't show your hand. Not yet. If this really was war, then I couldn't afford to reveal my strategy. She thought she was playing me, preparing in secret. Fine. I'd play along. I let her think I was clueless, docile, waiting to be blindsided. All the while, I'd keep securing myself, making sure that when she finally made her move, she'd have no idea how prepared I was. But as I slid her phone back in her purse and crept into the bedroom, I caught a glimpse of her in the dim light. Her face soft, peaceful in sleep. And for the briefest moment, doubt clawed at me. What if I had misinterpreted the texts? What if paperwork wasn't divorce? What if all this suspicion was just me destroying us from the inside? I turned away before that thought could take root. I told myself I was protecting what was mine, nothing more. Still, as I lay awake beside her, staring into the darkness, I couldn't escape the bitter truth. I no longer recognized the woman sleeping next to me. And worse, I wasn't sure I recognized myself anymore either. The breaking point came the following weekend. Claire suggested we go out for dinner, something we hadn't done in weeks. She even smiled when she brought it up, a faint echo of the woman I once knew, the woman I had fallen in love with. For a second, I almost believed it was genuine. But by then, suspicion had its claws too deep in me. Instead of excitement, I felt my guard rise. Why dinner? Why now? Was she softening me up before dropping the bomb? Still, I agreed. I needed to see what she was playing at. We ended up at a little Italian place downtown, one of her favorites. The kind with dim lights, checkered tablecloths, the smell of garlic butter thick in the air. I watched her across the table, her eyes catching the candlelight. She looked beautiful, familiar, yet strangely distant, like a memory I couldn't fully touch anymore. For a while, we kept things light, work, the weather, a funny story about her coworker. But I was only half listening. My mind churned beneath the surface, every smile of hers dissected, every pause scrutinized. Finally, midway through the meal, she put her fork down, folded her hands, and looked at me. "Mark," she said softly, "we really need to talk." My stomach twisted. This was it, the moment I had been dreading. I gripped my glass of water, forcing my expression to stay neutral. "About what?" I asked, though my voice came out tighter than I wanted. She hesitated, eyes flicking away, then back. "I've been keeping something from you, and I don't want it anymore." Her words were deliberate, heavy, carrying the kind of weight that could only precede catastrophe. My pulse pounded in my ears. My mind screamed divorce. Here it comes. She's about to say it. But before she could continue, the waiter arrived, interrupting with fresh bread and grated Parmesan. Claire gave him a tight smile, then leaned back, her moment broken. I sat there, my frustration spiking, teeth grinding as the waiter poured more water into my glass like the world wasn't seconds away from shattering. When he finally walked away, she didn't return to what she had been saying. Instead, she pushed food around her plate, her silence infuriating me. Conflict boiled inside me. Every nerve screamed to force it out of her, to demand she say the words, to make her confirm what I already knew. But another part of me hesitated, because once it was said, once it was real, there would be no going back. So I let the silence stretch, every bite of food turning to ash in my mouth. Waiting for her to pick the fight I was too afraid to start. And when we finally left the restaurant, the words still unspoken, I knew we were headed toward a collision we couldn't avoid. The car ride home was suffocating. The city lights blurred past the windshield as I gripped the steering wheel, my jaw tight, my chest heavy. Claire sat beside me, staring out the window, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She hadn't said another word about what she needed to talk about. That silence, her withholding, felt like a blade pressed against my throat. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "So," I said, my voice sharp in the confined space, "what was it you wanted to tell me at dinner?" She turned her head slowly, her face unreadable. "Not now, Mark. Please." The words lit something hot inside me. "Not now? You've been saying that for weeks. You tell me we need to talk, and then you don't. What is it? Just say it." Her eyes narrowed. "Why are you so on edge all the time?" I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the quiet car. "Maybe because my wife is keeping secrets from me. Because I can feel something's going on, and you won't admit it." Her mouth opened like she was about to answer, but then she stopped, closed her lips, turned her gaze back to the window. That silence was worse than any confession. I gripped the wheel tighter, frustration clawing at me, my thoughts screaming, "She's already made her decision. She's just waiting for the right moment to drop it." By the time we pulled into the driveway, I was shaking with tension. Claire got out without a word, walked straight inside, and disappeared upstairs. I stayed in the car, staring at the darkened house. The life we had built together suddenly looked foreign to me, like I was returning to someone else's home. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. Whatever talk she was preparing for wasn't going to be small. It wasn't going to be something we could brush off or patch up. It was going to change everything. But I also knew this. I wasn't going to let her take me by surprise. If she thought she could control the timing, she was wrong. I was ready to fight, no matter the cost. The next morning, I woke with a kind of grim determination I hadn't felt before. No more pacing the house like a trapped animal. No more waiting for her to pull the trigger. If she was planning something, I'd be ready. If she wanted war, I'd fight back. I got up earlier than usual, before Claire even stirred. The house was quiet, still carrying that faint tension from the night before. I went straight to my study, closed the door, and opened my laptop. This time, I wasn't just moving money around. I was building a fortress. I contacted an old colleague I trusted, someone outside the state who owed me favors. I began setting up shell companies, discrete accounts, backup plans. The kind of financial maneuvers that most people wouldn't understand, let alone trace. Every step was clean, legal, but shielded so tightly that no lawyer could touch them without a fight. It felt ruthless, maybe even paranoid, but I didn't care. I'd spent my career protecting other people's wealth. Why shouldn't I protect my own? As I worked, I thought about Claire upstairs, sleeping peacefully or maybe pretending to. I wondered if she had any idea that while she was plotting, I was plotting too. That while she was planning her paperwork, I was erasing any chance she had of gutting me financially. But beneath that determination, there was something else, a flicker of guilt I couldn't quite extinguish. Because the truth was, the more I secured myself, the more I was also admitting that our marriage was over. Maybe not on paper yet, but in spirit. We were no longer husband and wife in the true sense. We were opponents circling each other, waiting to strike. And yet, even in my bitterness, a part of me still remembered the early days. The woman who laughed at my corny jokes, who stayed up late eating pizza on the kitchen floor with me, who once told me I was her whole world. Where had that gone? Was it all a lie? Or had I lost her somewhere along the way without noticing? I shoved the thought down. Now wasn't the time for sentimentality. By noon, I had created a financial wall so strong that even if she blindsided me with divorce papers tomorrow, she wouldn't walk away with more than the bare minimum. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow, because no matter how determined I was, I couldn't shake the gnawing truth. If she was really leaving me, then all I was doing was fighting over the scraps of a life already broken. And that afternoon, Claire finally confronted me in a way I hadn't expected, turning my determination into something far more complicated. It happened in the kitchen, just as the late afternoon sun spilled across the counter. I had just finished a call with my colleague, making arrangements to move one final account. My chest was still tight with that adrenaline rush of control when I stepped out of the study and found Claire waiting by the sink. She wasn't scrolling her phone, wasn't rushing out the door. She was just standing there, her arms folded, eyes locked on me like she had been waiting. "We need to talk," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made my stomach tighten. I froze in the doorway, my mind racing. This was it, the moment I'd been bracing for. All right, I said carefully, forcing my tone flat. Talk. She hesitated, biting her lip, then shook her head slightly. Not like this. You've been distant. Cold. I feel like you're hiding something from me. The words hit me like a slap. She accusing me? My chest burned with indignation. I've been hiding something? I shot back, harsher than I intended. Funny coming from you. Her eyebrows knit together. What's that supposed to mean? I wanted to tell her everything. About the email to the attorney, about the cryptic texts, about the way she'd been acting. But the words lodged in my throat. If I admitted what I knew, I'd also admit how I knew it. And that would mean revealing just how far I'd gone. Snooping through her laptop, her phone, treating her like an enemy. So instead, I let the frustration twist my words. You've been different, Claire. Secretive. Always on your phone, gone all the time. If you've got something to say, just say it. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she exhaled slowly. I was trying to wait until the right time. But maybe there isn't one. My pulse hammered in my ears. Here it comes. I've been meeting with someone, she said finally. The world seemed to tilt. My throat tightened. Meeting with someone, I repeated, my voice low, dangerous. An attorney? She blinked, startled. What? No, not an attorney. A contractor. That word stopped me cold. A what? A contractor, she repeated, her eyes softening now, though confusion still lingered in her gaze. I wanted it to be a surprise, but I've been talking to them about renovating the house. The kitchen, the downstairs bathroom. I thought it might give us a fresh start. I just stared at her, my thoughts stumbling over themselves. Contractor. Renovations. Fresh start. The words didn't fit with the narrative I had built in my head. You're serious? I managed. She frowned. Of course I'm serious. Why would I lie about that? I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was already flashing back to the text messages, the ones about timelines, finalizing paperwork. My chest ached with a sickening realization. Had I completely misread everything? But before I could ask, before I could admit what I'd seen, she shook her head and turned away, her voice quieter now. I don't know what's happening with you, Mark. But lately, it feels like you're already halfway out the door. Her words cut deeper than any confirmation of divorce could have. Because in that moment, I realized she might not have been the one planning to leave at all. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Claire breathed softly beside me, the faint glow of the moon slipping through the curtains. My mind spun in circles, replaying her words over and over. A contractor, fresh start, halfway out the door. Could it really be true? Had I twisted every little sign into evidence of betrayal, when all along she'd been planning something else, something that was supposed to bring us closer, not tear us apart? The text came back to me. Timelines. Paperwork. Keeping it quiet until the right moment. Suddenly, they didn't sound like divorce anymore. They sounded like plans for permits, contracts, and construction schedules. And that email to the attorney? Could she have meant something entirely unrelated? Estate planning, work documents, anything else? My stomach churned with shame. I thought back to the weeks I'd spent secretly moving money, hiding assets, turning my own wife into an enemy in my head. If she ever discovered what I had done, how could I possibly explain it? How could I justify preparing for war against a woman who, maybe, had only been trying to build a new beginning for us? But then another thought struck me, dark, desperate, clawing. What if she's lying? What if Renovations were just a cover story, a way to dodge the confrontation I had forced at the kitchen counter? What if the contractor was real, but the attorney was too tucked away in the shadows, waiting until she had everything in place before pulling the rug out from under me? I couldn't know for sure, and not knowing was worse than either truth. By 3 a.m., I was sitting in my study, head in my hands, heart pounding with desperation. I had two choices: trust her and risk being blindsided if I was wrong, or dig deeper, cross the line even further, and find out once and for all what she was hiding. The problem was, I had already crossed too many lines to turn back. So I made my decision. If Claire thought she could keep secrets from me, then I would uncover them myself, even if it meant burning whatever remained of our marriage in the process. The next morning, I put my plan into motion. Claire left early for work, coffee in hand, barely a word exchanged between us. As soon as the door closed, I went upstairs, straight to her closet. My pulse hammered as I dug through her drawers, searching for anything, receipts, documents, scraps of paper that might reveal the truth. At first, I found nothing unusual, just the typical clutter. Scarves, old receipts from Target, a shoebox filled with birthday cards. But then, tucked inside a file folder, I found a manila envelope with her handwriting on the front, project notes. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were floor plans, sketches of our kitchen, color swatches for cabinets, printed estimates from a construction company. The words finalized by end of the month were scribbled at the top of one page in her neat handwriting. I stared at it, my chest tightening with a complicated cocktail of relief and dread. She hadn't been lying. The texts, the emails, the secrecy, they really were about renovations. For a moment, relief washed over me, so strong it almost buckled my knees. She wasn't planning to leave. She was planning to rebuild. But then came the dread, because all I could think about was the money I had moved, the accounts I had hidden, the fortress I had built around myself. Claire had no idea what I had done, no idea that I had already assumed the worst about her and acted on it. If she found out, I sat there on the closet floor, the papers spread around me, and felt like a fool. A paranoid, bitter fool who had nearly dismantled his own marriage with suspicion alone. Yet even as the shame burned in me, another thought whispered in the back of my mind. What if this is only part of the truth? What if the renovations were real, but the attorney was too? What if she wanted a fresh kitchen and a fresh start without me? That possibility clung to me like smoke, refusing to clear. I gathered the papers, placed them back exactly as I found them, and sat in my study for the rest of the day, my mind unraveling. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But I couldn't unsee the weeks of distance, the text that still didn't fully add up, the silence that sat like a stone between us. And as desperation grew inside me, I made a choice I knew was dangerous. I would follow her. If Claire was telling me the truth, I'd know. And if she wasn't, if the attorney was still in the picture, I'd uncover it myself. The following Wednesday, I put my plan into action. Claire had told me she was working late again, the same excuse she'd used more than once over the past month. Normally, I would have stayed home, stewing in suspicion. But not this time. This time, I grabbed my jacket, slipped into my car, and waited a block down from her office. I felt ridiculous at first, like some jealous teenager playing detective. But the longer I sat there, engine idling, the more justified it seemed. If she was telling the truth, I'd finally be able to let go of this gnawing doubt. If she wasn't, I'd know before she had the chance to ambush me. At 6:45, she walked out of the office building. My chest tightened as I watched her scan the parking lot, her hair falling over her shoulder in that effortless way that used to make me melt. She didn't look suspicious, just tired. But when she climbed in her car, she didn't head home. I followed. She drove across town, past the restaurants and shops, into a quieter neighborhood. Finally, she pulled into the lot of a small brick building with a faded sign, Davenport and Associates. My stomach dropped. Davenport wasn't a contractor. Davenport was a law firm. I gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached, my breath shallow as I watched her walk inside. The rational part of me tried to explain it away. Maybe she was there for something else, property paperwork, estate planning, anything. But the paranoia I had lived with for weeks screamed louder. This is it. She lied. It's divorce. I sat there for nearly an hour, my eyes locked on that door, my heart pounding with each minute that passed. When she finally emerged, she wasn't carrying blueprints or swatches. She was clutching a thick folder. She slid it in her bag, got back in her car, and drove off, completely unaware that her husband was 2 cars behind, watching every move. By the time we reached home, I was shaking with a twisted mix of anger and vindication. All her talk about contractors and renovations lies. The papers I found in her closet, a cover story. She had played me. Or had she? The folder could have been anything. I hadn't seen inside. But the sight of her walking out of that law office branded itself into me, drowning out any softer possibilities. That night, I couldn't look at her without my blood boiling. She sat across from me at the dinner table, talking casually about her day, and all I could see was the folder. The law office. The betrayal I was now convinced was real. And as she smiled faintly over a glass of wine, I made a silent vow. If she wanted war, she was going to get one. I barely slept that night. I lay on my side of the bed, staring into the dark while Claire's breathing stayed steady and calm. The image of her walking out of Davenport and Associates with that folder burned behind my eyes. I felt my jaw lock tighter each time I replayed it. The worst part? She acted like nothing had happened. She sat across from me at dinner, poured wine, smiled faintly, and carried on with small talk as though she hadn't just taken a hammer to the foundation of our marriage. That calmness, that performance, it infuriated me more than if she'd admitted everything outright. By dawn, my decision was made. If she thought she could play me for a fool, she was dead wrong. The next morning, I got up before her and sat in my study, the blue light of my laptop washing over my face. I reviewed every transfer I had made, every account I had hidden. The fortress was secure, untouchable. I added another layer of protection, rerouting assets through a business trust under my colleague's name. If Claire thought she'd walk away with half, she'd be lucky to walk away with a fraction. But protecting my finances wasn't enough anymore. I needed to know exactly what she was planning. No more speculation. No more guessing games. So I started digging deeper. First, I checked our shared calendar. She had marked appointments here and there, vague and unsuspicious on the surface. But cross-referencing them against her actual work hours showed gaps, pockets of time she hadn't accounted for. Then, I opened her desk drawer. Inside, tucked beneath a stack of old bills, I found a small, spiral-bound notebook. My hands trembled as I flipped through it. Most of it was mundane, grocery lists, reminders, to-dos. But toward the back, the handwriting changed. Neater, more deliberate. There was a list of names. Contractors, designers, plumbers. She had been telling the truth about renovations. I stared at it, confused, almost relieved, until I noticed one name at the bottom of the page, Davenport. My chest constricted. She hadn't lied. She really had been working on plans for the house. But she also had been to that law firm. Both realities were true, existing side by side, and I had no idea which one was the bigger story. I put the notebook back carefully, my thoughts racing. Maybe Davenport was handling the permits for construction. Maybe it had nothing to do with divorce. But the folder she carried out of that office haunted me too much to believe that. As I sat back in the chair, the room spinning around me, one thing became clear. Whatever Claire was planning, it was bigger than I realized. And if I didn't figure it out soon, I was going to lose control of everything. The following week felt like walking a tightrope over a canyon. Every moment with Claire was layered with double meaning. Every smile, every word, every silence. I dissected them all. She was juggling something. I could feel it. And now that I knew Davenport was in the mix, I couldn't stop wondering if I was living in a marriage that had already ended and simply hadn't been announced yet. But I wasn't going to wait for the ground to collapse beneath me. So, on a Wednesday afternoon, I did something reckless. I called Davenport and Associates. My palms were slick as I held the phone, rehearsing what I'd say. I didn't dare use my real name, of course. I pretended to be a potential client, interested in estate planning services. After a few exchanges with the receptionist, I casually asked if Claire had been in recently, pretending I was referred by her. The receptionist hesitated, then said politely, "Yes, she's a client. Would you like me to connect you to the associate handling her file?" My stomach dropped. My hand gripped the phone so tight it hurt. I forced a quick, awkward laugh. "Oh, no, that's all right. I'll reach out myself later. Thanks." I hung up, my pulse racing. She wasn't just browsing. She wasn't just inquiring. She was a client. That single word felt like a death sentence. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, bouncing between fury and despair. All her talk about renovations. Was that just camouflage? Was she stringing me along while the legal machinery, quietly built the case against me. By the time Claire came home, my face must have betrayed something. She studied me across the dinner table, her brow furrowing. "You look pale," she said softly. "Rough day." I forced a smile, my teeth clenched. "Something like that." She reached across, brushing her fingers against mine. The touch should have comforted me, but instead it felt like a cruel joke. How could she sit there, tender and calm, while preparing to gut me behind my back? That night, while she slept, I sat awake in my study, staring at the glow of my computer screen. The fortress I'd built around my assets was strong, but it wasn't enough. If Claire wanted to play dangerous, then I was going to have to take risks too. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about survival. The risk I decided to take was one I'd sworn I'd never cross into: surveillance. It sounds dramatic, I know, but when you feel your marriage slipping into the shadows, when you're convinced the person you share a bed with is plotting against you, desperation makes you bold. Or reckless. Maybe both. The next day, while Claire was at work, I drove across town to a small electronics shop. I paid cash for a discreet GPS tracker and a tiny voice recorder. Things most people would never imagine needing, but in my state of mind, they felt like armor. When I returned home, I slipped the tracker under her car's rear bumper, hands trembling, my ears straining for the sound of footsteps. The recorder I hid in the drawer of her desk, set to activate whenever it picked up voices. My stomach churned with guilt even as I did it, but I kept telling myself, if she's honest, I'll never need this. If she's not, at least I'll finally know. That evening, Claire came home later than usual. I watched from the living room as she walked through the door, hair slightly windblown, carrying her tote bag. She smiled faintly and kissed my cheek before heading upstairs. To anyone else, it might have looked normal. But to me, it was a performance. After she went to bed, I checked the tracker from my laptop. The ping locations told a story. She had gone to work, yes, but then spent nearly 2 hours parked outside Davenport and Associates before coming home. My stomach sank. The next morning, before she woke, I checked the recorder. My heart pounded as I skipped through long stretches of silence until finally, voices. Claire's voice, low and measured, speaking to someone on the phone. "Yes, I think end of the month works." "No, he doesn't know yet. I'll tell him when it's finalized." My blood ran cold. That was it. Proof. Hard evidence that she was keeping something massive from me. I closed the drawer, my hands shaking, and sat on the edge of the bed, watching her sleep. She looked peaceful, almost angelic, as though she weren't orchestrating my downfall piece by piece. But I wasn't fooled anymore. The risk I had taken had paid off because now I knew. I wasn't just suspicious. I wasn't just paranoid. Claire was hiding something that would detonate our lives before the month was over. And the only question left was, would I wait for her to make the move, or would I strike first? The choice gnawed at me every second of the day. I'd sit at my desk at work, staring at spreadsheets, but all I could see was Claire on the phone, whispering about finalizing things by the end of the month. I'd lie awake at night listening to her steady breathing beside me, wondering how much of it was real and how much of it was an act. I had the evidence, the tracker logs, the recording. I could confront her anytime, but confrontation meant exposure. If I admitted what I knew, I'd also admit how I knew it. And once that was out, there'd be no going back. So instead, I planned. I began compiling my own paperwork, discreetly meeting with a lawyer I trusted. If Claire wanted to ambush me with divorce, I'd be ready with countermeasures. She wouldn't strip me bare. She wouldn't make me another story of a man blindsided and gutted. But the deeper I went, the angrier I became. Every time I looked at her, every time she smiled, every time she asked how my day was, it felt like a betrayal. I imagined her laughing with her lawyer, plotting timelines, rehearsing her speech about why it just wasn't working anymore. I imagined her walking away with half of everything I'd built, and the thought lit a fire in my chest. By the time the weekend arrived, the anger had reached a boiling point. Saturday morning, Claire asked if I wanted to go furniture shopping with her. Something about new dining chairs to match the renovation plans. I almost laughed in her face. Furniture shopping? When she was planning to torch our marriage within weeks. I agreed anyway, but not because I cared about the furniture. because I wanted to see how long she could keep up the charade. We wandered through the store, her pointing out fabrics and finishes, me nodding absently, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. Watching her play house, pretending everything was fine, only sharpened the blade of my suspicion. Finally, as she ran her hand across a polished oak table, I snapped. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. She turned, blinking. "Doing what?" "This." My voice was low, trembling with rage. "Pretending. Smiling. Acting like you care about dining chairs when we both know you're planning something else." Her brow furrowed, confusion, or was it guilt, shadowing her face. "Mark, what are you talking about?" The words burned in my throat, pressing to be released. I wanted to scream about Davenport, about the recordings, about the lies. But I held back, my fists clenched at my sides, because the showdown was coming. And when it came, I wanted to be the one who dictated the terms. Not her. Claire stared at me in the furniture store, her expression shifting between confusion and something that almost looked like fear. "Mark," she said slowly, cautiously, as though speaking to a cornered animal, "I don't know what you think is going on, but don't." I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. A couple browsing nearby glanced at us before pretending not to listen. I lower my tone, leaning in. "Don't insult me by pretending. I know. I've known for weeks." Her lips parted, but no words came out. That silence was enough to fuel the fire burning in my chest. I didn't care anymore about playing subtle. I wanted her to feel what I'd felt every sleepless night, every moment of suspicion clawing at me. "You've been sneaking around," I continued. "The late nights, the calls, the meetings. You think I don't notice? You think I don't know where you've been?" Her eyes widened then, just a flicker. But I caught it. Proof enough in my mind that I was right. I straightened, my pulse hammering. "So go ahead, Claire. Say it. Say what you've been planning. Because I'm done pretending." The color drained from her face. For a second, I thought she might actually do it, confess, admit everything. But instead, she shook her head slowly, almost sadly. "You've changed," she whispered. "I don't even recognize you anymore." And with that, she turned and walked toward the exit, her shoulders tight, her head held high. I stood there in the store, my chest heaving, my hands trembling with rage and vindication and something darker, fear. Not of losing her, but of what came next. Because her reaction told me one thing. The showdown wasn't just close. It had already begun. I didn't chase her out of the store. I couldn't. My legs felt like concrete, rooted to the polished tile floor as she disappeared through the sliding glass doors. People moved around me, couples laughing, kids tugging at their parents, and I stood there alone, vibrating with the aftermath of the confrontation. By the time I finally made it back to the car, Claire was already gone. Her spot in the lot was empty, and my chest hollowed out at the sight. She hadn't waited for me. She hadn't even texted. On the drive home, my mind churned with questions I couldn't answer. Had I pushed too far? Had she already decided I wasn't worth fighting for? Was she, at this very moment, sitting in that lawyer's office again, folder open, fast-tracking the plan she'd been working on in the shadows? When I pulled into the driveway, her car was there. Relief flickered in me, but it was brief, because inside the house, Claire was waiting in the kitchen, her arms crossed, her face a mask of exhaustion. "Mark," she said as soon as I walked in, "we can't keep doing this." I dropped my keys on the counter. My voice came out rough, jagged. "Then stop lying to me." Her eyes narrowed, sharp but glistening. "I'm not lying. But you don't believe me anymore, do you?" Silence. Heavy. She shook her head and leaned back against the counter. "You've been so different lately. Suspicious. Distant. Cold. I keep trying to pull you back, but it feels like you're already gone." Her words struck deeper than I wanted to admit. Because if I looked at myself honestly, really honestly, maybe she was right. Maybe in my effort to protect myself, I'd already stepped out of the marriage in every way that mattered. But admitting that would mean admitting weakness, and I wasn't ready for that. So instead, I hardened my voice. "If you want out, Claire, just say it. Don't string me along with talk about renovations and fresh starts. Just be honest." Her lips trembled like she wanted to speak, but instead she turned away, blinking back something I couldn't name. I can't talk to you when you're like this, she whispered and walked upstairs, leaving me in the kitchen with the echo of my own anger. I sank into a chair, my hands covering my face. For the first time, I felt something heavier than suspicion or anger. I felt grief. Grief, it clung to me like a fog. I sat in the dark kitchen for hours, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. My anger had drained out of me, leaving only the hollow ache of something I wasn't ready to admit. I was losing her. Maybe I'd already lost her. I thought about the years we had shared. The first time I saw her laugh at one of my terrible jokes. The way she leaned into me at the movie theater on our third date. The quiet Sunday mornings when we'd sit on the porch with coffee, talking about everything and nothing. Those memories felt like photographs curling at the edges, fading with each day we drifted apart. And yet, even in that grief, suspicion gnawed at me still. I couldn't shake the image of Claire walking into Davenport and Associates with that folder clutched against her chest. I couldn't unhear her whisper on the recorder, "He doesn't know yet." So which was it? Was she the woman who once loved me fiercely and wanted a fresh start? Or was she the woman building a legal case against me, brick by brick, while I slept beside her? When I finally climbed the stairs that night, the bedroom was dark. Claire was already in bed, turned away from me, her breathing steady. I stood in the doorway for a long time, staring at the shape of her beneath the blankets. I wanted to crawl in beside her and ask her everything. I wanted to tell her about my fear, my paranoia, the nights I lay awake imagining her leaving. But the words stuck in my throat. Pride, anger, fear of the truth. They all wrapped around me like chains. Instead, I slid into bed silently, leaving a gulf of space between us. That gulf felt wider than any canyon. And as I lay there in the dark, grief slowly hardened back into something else. Resolve. If this was the end of our marriage, I wasn't going to let it be an ending written by her. I'd write it myself. The next morning, I woke with a cold clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. No more pacing. No more guessing. No more letting Claire dictate the silence between us. If she was going to end this marriage, then I would decide how it ended. I dressed early, crisp shirt, polished shoes. The kind of armor a man wears when he's preparing for a battlefield he can't name. Claire was still upstairs when I left the house, but I didn't say a word. Instead, I drove straight to my lawyer's office. He was an old colleague, someone who'd seen men gutted in court, stripped bare by surprise divorces. I laid everything out, my suspicions, my financial moves, even the surveillance. His face tightened as he listened, but he didn't interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Mark," he said slowly, "you've already gone further than most. Your assets are locked down, your finances are untouchable. But let me give you the blunt truth. If your wife really is planning a divorce, you need to get ahead of her. File first. Control the narrative." The words settled over me like a verdict. File first. Control the narrative. It made sense. For weeks, I'd been reacting to Claire, chasing shadows, doubting every word and movement. Filing first would mean seizing control. No more waiting for her to pull the trigger. I'd be the one pulling it. But even as the logic clicked into place, something inside me resisted. Filing first meant ending it for real. It meant no chance of reconciliation, no possibility that I was wrong and we could salvage what was left. I thought about the papers I'd found in her closet, the renovation sketches, the plans for a fresh start. Was I really willing to throw everything away without knowing the whole truth? My lawyer must have seen the conflict on my face. "You don't have to decide today," he said, sliding a folder toward me. "But the longer you wait, the more power she has. If you're going to do this, do it soon." I drove home with that folder sitting heavy on the passenger seat, its presence louder than the hum of the engine. When I pulled in the driveway, Claire's car was there. Through the front window, I could see her moving about the kitchen, sunlight catching her hair. She looked normal, ordinary, like the woman I once trusted without question. And I hated that I couldn't tell if it was real or just another performance. That night, as she set the table for dinner, I slipped the folder into my desk drawer. I hadn't signed anything yet, but the option sat there waiting like a loaded gun. For the next few days, that folder felt like it was glowing through the wood of my desk. Every time I walked into the study, my eyes darted to the drawer. Every time Claire smiled at me or touched my arm in passing, I wondered if I should pull it out, sign the papers, and put an end to the charade. But something kept me from doing it. Maybe it was cowardice. Maybe it was hope. Or maybe it was that stubborn voice in me that whispered, what if you're wrong? What if you're about to blow up your life over nothing? The tension between us grew thicker. Conversations felt brittle, fragile, like they could shatter into an argument with one wrong word. Yet, strangely, there were moments, fleeting, fragile moments, when I almost believed things could still be saved. One night, I came home late from work to find her curled on the couch with a blanket, watching one of our old favorite movies. She looked up and smiled faintly. Want to join me? For a second, I almost said yes. Almost let myself sit beside her, let my arm drape around her shoulders like it used to. But the image of her walking into Davenport and Associates with that folder was too fresh, too raw. I muttered something about being tired and went upstairs instead. Another time, she brought home takeout from my favorite burger place. Thought you might like a treat, she said, her eyes soft, searching mine for something. I thanked her, but the food turned to ash in my mouth. Let's pause here for a moment. No need to drag this on all at once. It's the perfect place to take a break and think about everything that's happened so far, the secrets, the doubts, and what they might really mean. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to part 1 of my story. Speech Balloon, tell me in the comments. What do you think Claire is really planning? Is it just renovations? Or is there something darker? Thumbs up, don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. And bell subscribe so you don't miss part 2, where everything will unfold.